now we have Dominik. I mean, Dominik is like, actually for me, Dominik is the desktop person because he talks about how you can actually take advantage of Flutter by like using its desktop support and so on and so forth. He has really good talks, but like what I know him from is like I knew him from like Flutter Warsaw and Flutter Europe as well because he did the Flutter Europe app in Flutter, if I remember correctly.
Yes, that's right.
Exactly. Exactly. And right now he's working as a freelance mobile developer focused on Flutter. And yeah, like he's a Flutter guru for me. So I'm really excited for your talk. And today he will
Thanks
talk
a lot.
about convenient internationalization of Flutter apps. So we are done.
Okay, thanks. Thank you very much, Sally. Thanks, George. I'm very happy to be here tonight. And as Sally said, I'm going to talk about internationalization in Flutter apps. So maybe let's not spend any more time on introductions and just go straight to the topic. As Sally said, I'm a freelance Flutter developer. I've been working with Flutter since 2018. Before that, I was using Xamarin and .NET on the backend. I am involved with Flutter Warsaw and Flutter Europe conference. You can find out more on our Twitter and websites. And you can also read some of my blog posts on my blog roszkowski.dev. Recently, I've been posting some CodePen challenges. So if you're into that, I can kindly invite you to follow me. Sally said at the beginning that internationalization is kind of a problem for us all the time. Like we have to do it, but we don't want to do it. Sometimes we're struggling with that. There are many, many ways to do it. There is an official way by a Flutter team described in the guidelines. There's a way, there are many ways described on GitHub repositories. There are many talks about it. And today we're going to go through some of them, like the official one, the automated one, and the one that I found the most convenient for me. Like I've been doing several apps already, and like the one that I'm gonna show you tonight is going to be, like, in my opinion, the most convenient. So maybe let's start and maybe start from the basics. What actually is internationalization? And maybe you've heard also a term called localization. So there's a slight difference, and like many developers discuss what's like the encyclopedic difference between them. So usually internationalization is just adding support for several languages in your app and the app works across different countries, across different locales, the same way. Like there is no difference. Like the app is internationalized and like can work anywhere in the world. Localization, on the other hand, is more focused on adapting your app to a given market. Let's say like apps developed for an Arabic market or Japan market or United States might be completely different in their layout, in the navigation. Some terms are maybe considered in some countries as rude, but in others they can be just typical words. So localization is also taking into account some specifics of a given market, specifics of a given language. And today we're going to just talk about internationalization, how to make it efficiently, how to make it conveniently, and like how to not to spend too much time on that. So maybe let's start with what Flutter actually provides in terms of internationalization. So by default, Flutter supports only English. So you will get only English translation for some common buttons, some tooltips, and so on. So they are usually, if you want to like get deep dive into that, I recommend the official documentation. But let's briefly talk about how Flutter actually achieves that. So by default, Flutter is using something called default material localization in material library, and accordingly Cupertino localizations in the iOS library. And there's also another localization like for general purpose widgets. So Flutter provides some popular terms like back, next, OK, cancel, and so on for many of the material widgets, but only in English. If you want to have support for more languages like Polish, German, French, you have to add a package from the Flutter SDK called Flutter localization. By adding it to your PW-Spec, you will get additional 77 languages support for Flutter. So let's see how it is actually done. So in order to do that, you just have to add localization delegates to your material app. It's fairly simple. Yeah, you just add global material localizations.delegate to your material app, widgets, and Cupertino. This way, no matter whether you're using a material or Cupertino library, you will be able to have the translations in one of the supported languages. So below that, you can see that there is supported locales. And here I just added manually 3 languages, which are English, Polish, and Chinese. So there are many ways to provide these locales. This is one of the simplest one. I just submit the country code. But you can provide many different locales like simplified Chinese, traditional, and so on. So if you can check on the documentation for the Flutter localizations which languages are actually supported. If you add this delegates and if you add this supported locales, you'll be able to, for instance, see localized labels or tooltips in your app. So for instance, if you hover on over a back button, you will see a coding message in your language. In Polish, it would be cofnij. So this is like a first thing that you will do if you want to add languages support to your app. Yeah, just add these delegates, and we'll see in a moment, like in details, what are they actually doing. So this is a simple app that has this basic support from the Flutter SDK. So this is nothing else than just adding these delegates to this app. And this is displayed inside a device preview package. So this is a package by Alois Daniel. And you can, for instance, change the current locale of a device that it is running. So for instance, right now we can see that the current locale is English, but actually it is not English, this is Afrikaans, but I will explain this in a minute why this displayed English for Afrikaans. Let us find the English one. There are many English locales, as you can see. So now we have a English locale in this app, and we can see several interesting things here. So for instance, the returned by the Flutter country code is EN. The first weekday is 0, which is Sunday. The label for back button is back, and for close is close. And the text and all the widgets look fairly normal. Yeah, so we have just alignment top left, alignment top start, and the text looks okay, just like that. This app supports Polish, German, Hindu, Arabic, and Chinese. So maybe let us switch to Polish. And as you can see, some things have changed. So for instance, the current locale has changed to Polish. The first weekday is Monday. The back and close labels are different. Yeah, these are just labels that would appear, for instance, as a tooltip or in your dialog. Nothing else actually changed. So maybe let us change to some more like some different language. So maybe let us try the Hindu. So here we can see some other changes. So for instance, maybe you saw that the text size changed. Also, the names are in the Hindi language, and the locale also changed. But I think the largest difference is visible if we switch to the Arabic. So let's just use simple Arabic. So here we can see how Flutter handles, so for instance, different directionality of a language. So the directionality of a language says us whether the language is from left to right or right to left. So Arabic is right to left. So the widget that we were using here, that was using the alignment directional, actually is using this directionality of a given locale. So it switched to the right side of the screen. The widget that doesn't use it stayed on the left side. So actually the difference is that we are using top start, not top left. So that's how you can distinguish the widgets that comply to the directionality. Also, the weekday is changed, but here we can see a very interesting thing. So the directionality of a text also affected all the sentences that we have here in the app. So for instance, now this paragraph is aligned to the right, and the let's say order of words here is also like from right to left. And if your user has an locale that is not supported by your app, so let's say choose Azerbaijani. So Azerbaijani is not supported by this app, so we fall back always to English by default. So this is like quick overview of capabilities of default Flutter localizations. But of course, this is not everything. So for instance, sometimes you can override locale for given subtree of your widgets. So for instance, maybe you need to show some part of your app only in English or only in Polish. So you can do it very easily. You just need to wrap everything with a widget called localization override. And here you can just provide the given locale, and this subtree will always be in Polish, no matter what is the locale of the app. Yeah. So this is fairly simple. So for instance, maybe you have your newsreader app, and you, for instance, need to show some text in Arabic. So maybe you will want to switch to Arabic locale for this page of the app. Okay, but this only provides us with some built-in translations and only built-in behavior for the app. But how can we add some custom translations to the app? Let's say we have some menu, we have some navigation, and we want to add some names in our language to this. So there are several ways to do it, but let's go through the official docs from flutter.dev. So this is fairly simple. You need to write some boilerplate code in order to achieve that. But actually, if you do it like for the second or the third time, it's fairly straightforward. So everything is based around localization delegates and widgets called localization. So firstly, you need to create a class called, let's say, in this case, demo localization. And we are not going to use any kind of files right now. Like we are not going to use JSON files. We are not going to use XML or ARB. We will just use this single file to store our translation. So here you can see that I have this localized values map. And the only thing that I do here is that I just type that for English locale, I have my title, which is Hello World. And for Spanish, I have title, which is Hola Mundo. And that's all. Like if I want to add another term, I will just add this here and in all the languages that I want to support. But as you can see, there are many problems with that. We're going to solve them in a minute, but as you can see, this is going to be very problematic if you, let's say, have hundreds of terms in your app and let's say several languages. But assume for now that we are just using this very, very simple class that stores its locale, provides this helper method localizations of, and that's all. Okay, so the second part is to create a custom class that will extend the localization delegate, and here we will provide the type of demo localizations. And and this class will handle the updates if are necessary, or if we were to use some kind of file that would have to be reloaded. Let's say it's JSON file, or this is some kind of database that we have in the background. This will handle the request for, let's say, reload. So for instance, we would be notified that the user locale has been changed, then this class will handle the reload of the terms. And how to use it is also very simple. You just add your delegate that you created as one of the localizations delegate to your material app, and you provide the supported locales. In our case, it was English and Spanish. And if you want to access anything from the locale, you just call the demo localizations of context.title. And if we go back to our demo localizations, we'll see that here I have my getter called title, and it just returns the value from this very map. This is like the very, very simple way to do it. And if you, let's say, have your very simple app, this might be enough. So for instance, I do it for my presentations, and that I have in Polish and English, that I just have some simple map of translations, and I can switch between them even without reloading any file. But this doesn't scale well. Yeah, like this will have some issues. You have to maintain your map in the Dart file and so on. So let's get it to the higher level, and let us meet the INTL package. So INTL package is a official package that provides many fantastic things related to internationalization. So it gives us ability to format numbers, format currencies, time, and so on. But today, we're just going to focus on how to use INTL to translate our app. So INTL is based on, is using command line tools that are part of the INTL package. So in order to use INTL to translate your app, we're going to first create a Dart file that will be used to generate ARB files. And I'm going to talk about ARB files in a second. Then, if you will have your ARB files generated from your app, you can send them to your translator or translate on your own in some tool. And when you have your ARB files, you can just import them to your Flutter project and regenerate Dart code with this third command, generate from ARB, and this will generate all the necessary translation files. But I think that this slide is not clear enough, so maybe let us move to the VS Code and see for ourselves how it's actually done. So maybe at first, let's see my commands that I executed before that. So before starting my presentation, I generated all the necessary files. So I run this command. You can copy this from the documentation. It doesn't matter, actually. The only important thing is that we're using the INTL translation tool with the extract to ARB option, and we're giving some outputs and inputs. So at first, I had my localization delegate and demo localization class. So this is my demo localization class that I created. This is based on the sample from the INTL package. So if you want to learn more, you can just go to the INTL documentation. But let us go through this. And I created my term. I also had to create it manually. You know, like at this stage, we're doing this manually. But the fun thing is that I don't have to do it like in map of strings and dynamics, or strings of strings. So I have my title, which is hello world, of name title, and this is some description. Actually, it doesn't matter what is here. And locale name is just from the provided from the current locale in the app. Then I had my demo localizations delegate, which is very, very simple in this case. And the important part is that I'm using here the intl message function. And this, if you want, you can see the source code, but the important part is that this will get me proper translation term from the ARB file, but actually from the Dart file, yeah? So if I had this, I just called this first command. Then I send my translation ARB files to my translator. They return me some English and Spanish translations. So let us see them. So the first one is English, yeah, so this is fairly simple. So my translator put here hello world, and in Spanish, hola mundo. So I had this English and Spanish translation. And the second part was here. I generated from ARB my Dart localization files, messages and messages Spanish, yeah. So that's all I had to do. So here you can see this is not too readable, but if you take a look here, you will see that I have my title key, and this is using this method simple message to look up for the term. But as you can see, this is not so simple to understand. So maybe there's some better way to do it. So is it really so convenient? And in my opinion, it's not. So you can base some of your custom solutions based upon that. You can create some other files, let's say JSON files that will be used by intl. You can use some database. You can use CSV files or whatever works for you. But at some point, you will reach this point that you will not want to update either the CSV file, either the JSON, or whatever. Like it will be just too time consuming to go back and forth between these files and remember to regenerate them and so on and so on. So there are some solutions on the market that actually take all this from you. And I know how it sounds, but actually I really enjoy translations of my app right now. So meet the Flutter intl extension. This works for VS Code and Android Studio. Here's the screenshot from the VS Code one. And this is an extension that streamlines your work with the internationalization and ARB files. This is created by the Localizely team. They have their paid translation platform. You don't have to use it to use the Flutter intl extension. You can use any other translation platform, but it will be a bit more difficult. But in general, you can use this without any third-party platform. So let's us focus for a second on this translation platform. So at some point when you will have many members of your team and you will have, let's say, product owner and other people involved in creation of your app, you will have to divide your work. So I recommend in such case to just use some translation tool to handle all of your translations. It can be Localizely, it can be PoEditor, Crowdin, Loco, and Bubble Edit, which is a desktop editor. All of them in some way support Flutter, not perfectly. Like the best one is Localizely, and then maybe Babel Edit, and these three are a bit worse. But if you don't want to use them, and if you don't want to, let's say, pay for them, you can always use the Google Spreadsheet. So there's many ways to use Google Spreadsheet for translation. And if you have some supported output format, let's say JSON, you can convert this file to the ARB pretty easily with this tool from BMW Tech. It also doesn't work perfectly for all the cases, but in general, it works just fine. So okay, So I was talking about these ARB files for some time. So maybe take a look at them. So as you can see here, here is my basic ARB file. And this is actually JSON. I think it's not like proper JSON. Sometimes it may not be parsed correctly. So that's why this is using Android resource bundle extension. This was developed by Google. It was used in Google Translation Toolkit. Right now, it is not used any. Like the translation toolkit is gone, so there are no official tools that support ARB ARB files. But the fun part of ARB files is that it supports plural forms and it supports genders. So for instance, let us see some basic ARB file that I have prepared. And placeholders. So here you can see some ARB term, which is a current locale, and it has this curly braces, and this is a placeholder that can be updated dynamically by developer. So you don't have to store, let's say, currency, you don't have to store age or whatever inside your translation. It will be interpolated by intl in the runtime. So this is very fun part. Also, I'm not sure if I can show you here, but I will try to do it in a second. ARB files support plural forms and support genders. So maybe let's start with some demo. So here is an app that uses the Flutter like the intl translation and is using the ARB files. So the only thing that I can do here is just to switch my locale from English to German. Yeah, good afternoon, welcome. So let me show you how you can actually work with translations and not spend too much time with that. So here is my project on Localizely. Small disclaimer, this is a paid platform, so not everybody can afford this, but they have some free plans for open source and so on. And I really enjoy it. I think this is one of the best, next to the Poe editor, this is one of the best platforms to translate. So maybe let me increase the font size here. Okay, so here, I don't know if you can see everything, but here I have some translation terms. So here's my current locale, some title. A nice thing is that I can provide some screenshots for my translators. But here is this term that we can see in my app, willkommen. And here, if I switch to German, willkommen. And the great part with the with this setup is that I can just update this here. This is already saved. Then I go to my VS Code. I run intl download. It is downloading my translations from the Localizely. If I go to my German translation, we can see that this changed. Actually, we can see the difference. This changed from willkommen to hello. It took 5 seconds maybe. It doesn't always work with hot reload, so I need to restart my app. But I can quickly go to this page that I wanted to show you. And here you can see it's already changed to hello. And of course, I showed it in slow-mo, but actually you can do it if you add some new text to your app or you just copy this from the design, you can do it and with the same pace, for instance, you run your tests or you look up the design specification. Yeah, this is starting to be one of your common steps when you develop. You just switch to another window, add new term. So maybe let us add new term. And let's enable the plural support. And German and English have very similar ways of plural forms. So maybe maybe not too good example, but for instance, in Polish, we have multiple forms of plurals. Oh, actually, it should be in German, yeah, but actually it doesn't matter right now. Yeah, so I added some dummy terms, and if I go to my VS Code and download my ARB files, they will be immediately visible here. And as you can see, this term is right now supporting the plural forms. If the L10N file was regenerated automatically for me, and if I go to, let's say, some test widget that I have here, I can easily use this in my app. It was test, and I can just provide, let's say, number, and depending on the number, the proper form will be used. So if it would be 1, it would be 1. If it would be, maybe let's go to this demo, which was here, and let us add here, not return, 1. If I use 2, it will be more. Yeah. So as you can see, it works pretty nice. You can also add support for genders and so on. So it's like game changer. If you're using some basic translation tool like just JSONs or your own custom solution, I think that if you will try this, you will just don't want to come back to previous solution. Okay. So just to like wrap up before we finish. So you can find like the manual that's to go through this on my website, but you can also go through the documentation of the Flutter INTL. Just to like sum up all these points that I wanted to mention today. So use some translation tool. Don't edit your localization files manually in VS Code or Android Studio. Use a tool that is designed for that. It could be desktop application, it could be web application, it could be free one or paid one. There are many ways to choose from. If you don't want to use the localized platform, which is paid, you can create your own custom bash script that will fetch this from the API. Most of the translation tools like PoEditor or Localizely or whatever, they provide some API to fetch the translation tool. You can also fetch the translation tool translation files from Google Spreadsheet. And I think the most important remark is that you have to add this like step of adding translation to your common process of developing your app. Like if you will wait with adding translations till the end of your development cycle, you won't do it. Like I can promise you, if you haven't added translations for 3 months, then at some point you will just can't, you won't be able to go through all of them, even with some regex or some scripts. It will be almost impossible to add all of them at once. So my recommendation is, if you haven't started it yet, start it now. If you start a new project, add your translations in your design process. And if you can outsource the translations to the customer, outsource it to some translator. But the most important thing is that you have to keep in mind that you have to keep this translation and your app in sync. Otherwise, it will just be very problematic to add this later. Yeah, and as I said, you can just skip these third-party tools like Localizely or PoEditor or Crowdin if you can afford them. But even though you should use some translation solution. So one important remark is that if you are developing for iOS, you have to also add this translations here in the Xcode. Yeah, so we just add plus and the translation and the language that your app should be translated to. This way you can also, for instance, translate your permission strings. And this is like full text, full slide full of text, just to sum up all the presentation. So as you saw from the beginning till the end, like this very last way of translating your app, everything is based on the localization delegate. Yeah. So like even this extension is using the localization delegates under the hood. So you can fairly easily understand this on your own. As you saw, there are many ways to add translations, internationalization to your app. You can use some custom localization delegate that will read the translation terms from JSON or XML. You can use your localization delegate from the INTL package. It was the second way. You can use some automated code generation with this INTL, Flutter INTL extension. You can use other tools, like there's a very popular extension called VS Code Flutter 18N JSON. I think it has 20-something thousand downloads. You can use Google Spreadsheet, and I think that many people actually do it. You can use any other form of handling your translation outside of your app. Important remark, I showed you like slight glimpse of how it works, but beware of directionality. So test your app in different locales, and the device preview package is very useful for that. So you don't have to switch your device locale just to test your app in different language. And add the internationalization support as soon as possible. If you haven't done it yet, do it tomorrow. And I will tell you, you will be grateful that you started to do it early. Okay, I finished before my deadline, so because I thought that it will take me much more time, but this is all. Thank you very much.